Hello, and welcome to Prairie Post. Coming up a little bit later in the show, we're looking at an exhibit at the Becker County Museum of old medical equipment. Well, but first, joining me now is the president of Dickinson State University, Dr. Thomas Mitzel. Dr. Mitzel, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored.
As we get started, tell the folks a little bit about yourself and your background.
Okay, well, I'll go all the way back to the beginning. I was born in Aberdeen, South Dakota, and I was raised in Aberdeen, South Dakota, with the majority of my relatives very close occupancy. And as I was growing up, Aberdeen has Northern State University, a very similar institution to Dickinson State University, and I spent a lot of time in athletics on the campus and academics on the campus. And as I grew up, it really sort of became my institution, which guided a lot of my decisions after I graduated. I went to college at Northern State University. By the time I got there, it seemed like the best place to be since it was my university in my city. I went in as an English major. I came out a chemist. So it's somewhat of a different pathway, and it happened because I blew up a reaction. I always tell people, if you're not prepared, just watch what happens and try to explain it, and that really got me interested. I met my wife at Northern, and she graduated 1 year prior to me. She graduated from Northern State College, and I graduated from Northern State University. I hold that over her head every day. She's much brighter than am I, so I have to have something to hold over her head. After graduation, I had no idea what to do. I went into college 3 months after high school, and obviously at 18 you know everything, and then you find out you know nothing. And I've had great mentors throughout my life, and one of them suggested I go to graduate school. And I ended up at Boston College, got a degree in theoretical organic chemistry, and from there I went to Ohio State University, did a postdoc, and I knew at that point I wanted to go into higher education. I did not know which level. Northern State was a small four-year institution, Boston College sort of in the middle, and Ohio State was at the time one of the largest land-grant universities in the nation. And I loved working with undergraduates, that's what I found. And when I got my first job, it was at Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut. Started as an assistant professor, did everything academic, taught courses from all the way from beginning courses to graduate courses, beginning graduate courses, did research. I loved doing events. Volleyball events, barbecues, mainly barbecues, you can tell. But I would get the students together in the summer and do those kinds of things. Just had a great time, really enjoyed myself. And as about 2008, I started in 1996. In 2008, I was asked to join the dean's office as the associate dean. And as any good faculty member, I laughed and hung up the phone. And they called back. As a faculty member, I always had a mantra that the administration was there solely to help faculty have the tools they need to teach our students at the highest possible level. And now I tell people, be careful what you say in public and come back to haunt you. So when it became my opportunity to help in administration, I took that. And my major concern was whether I'd still be able to work with students. And I found out if I did my job correctly, I could. I did that for 3 years. And I was hired as Dean of School of Natural Sciences at St. Edward's University in Austin. And there I also got the chance to be director of the Wild Basin Creative Research Center. So I wore several hats there. I did a lot of donor work, a lot of outreach, working with public entities. And as I tell the story, it was in January. I was sitting on the back patio in Austin in my shorts, drinking a beer, and the phone rang. And Trinity College was in a period of transition, and they were looking for somebody to come back and help with that transition. The president was getting ready to retire, and the vice president for academic affairs had taken a job elsewhere. So I spoke to the president at St. Edward's, spoke to the provost. We had done some really, really good things. I'm proud of what we accomplished there. But I went back to Trinity to help with the transition. And once there, I think I did a very nice job of helping with that transition. We have a new president in place, and she's doing just a wonderful job. And I fulfilled what I needed to fulfill. So when the position at Dickinson State University arose, I threw my hat in the ring. And coming from the Midwest, this was really what Rhonda, my wife, and I had wanted to do, is to come back to be at an institution where we both got our start. And I always tell people the degree I got, the undergraduate degree I got at Northern State University, is as good, if not better, than any of the degrees I've seen in any of the public or private institutions elsewhere. And that's what the Midwest offers, and I wanted to be a part of that.
Well, when you took over in Dickinson just in December, so you're relatively new to the job, how has the transition gone so far?
Interesting, very good actually, but interesting. I interviewed in September, and I had lunch with many of the industrial leaders from the city. And they were saying how supportive was Dickinson to DSU and how supportive was the region to Dickinson State University. And you're interviewing, you're being courted, wooed, so to speak. And so you take everything with a bit of a grain of salt. And I arrived on December 21st was when I began. And what I found is that support was actually stronger than what I had believed in the beginning. And it's been amazing that the city of Dickinson really rallies around Dickinson State University to a large extent. And they expect a lot, which they should. So it's been a very wild ride for the first 6 months, but very positive. We have a lot of projects going forward. We've made a lot of, I think, positive changes, and we're getting ready to really move well into the future.
Well, now your predecessors, they dealt with some controversial issues that impacted the university. Can you talk about some of those, and have you had a chance to meet with them with your short time here?
Great question. I have met with one of them, but let me go back to D.C. Costin came in at a time when Dickinson State University is going through some academic issues. They had degrees with international students. It was mainly from China that were not verifiable. I have not gone back to look at the exact details. I don't want to dredge up much of the past on that. But he was brought in to do some very difficult things, and that was to place the school back onto an academic path of strength. There was issues about accreditation. Should the institution actually be accredited? These are huge questions about which you need to answer. Plus, dealing with what they were calling a diploma mill. And again, it wasn't quite as bad as it sounded publicly, but I don't want to go into much of those details. It became very difficult to recruit students. In 2008, the institution had about 2,700 students, and today we're sitting at about 1,300. D.C. Costin had to deal with much of that fall. So you have budget impacts, you have academic impacts, you have higher learning issues, you are dealing with the state board when you're not in a very strong position. A lot of the work he did was internal. I always call doing the HVAC work. It's behind the scenes. You don't get much credit for that, and he did incredible work to make sure that DSU remained competitive and with a good reputation academically. And then you segue into Jim Osmond, who did more in 4 months than most presidents do their entire tenure. He was wonderful. He was a former president at North Dakota State University. He retired. Luckily for Dickinson, he retired in the Dickinson area, had a ranch. Jim is, I believe, 79. He acts like he's 40. And I think his wife would rather he slowed down a bit, but he never will. He began a lot of external outreach, where D.C. Costin had to fix the internal. Jim Osmond came in and fixed much of the external, reaching out to the community, again, reconnecting. The old foundation had gone under dissolution. We can talk about that a bit more if you'd like, but Jim helped start a brand new foundation for the institution, which was irreplaceable. If you don't have a foundation, you really cannot go forward as an institution. He reconnected much of the industry back into the campus, and I think gave people pride in DSU once again. So I tell people I'm lucky. I got here at a good time. D.C. Costin fixed all the internal plumbing. Jim Osmond reconnected that plumbing to the external world once again. And my job is to put a little wind in the sails and make sure it continues to go forward.
Okay. You mentioned the student obviously has gone down for the reasons you gave. So, but where primarily do your students come from?
We have, the majority of our students are from North Dakota, and many of them from the western part of North Dakota, but we do draw a tremendous number from Montana, and we do draw from South Dakota. I was surprised to find we get a lot of athletes, academic athletes from California and Florida. But when you look into it a little more carefully, it's probably not all that surprising. These are students who are faced with going to a very large public institution in their own state, where they can come to North Dakota and be part of Dickinson State University at the NAIA level and really compete at a national level. Many of our teams have gone postseason play. Our women's team just made postseason play this weekend. But you have to carry high academics as well as athletics. And being a scholar athlete at the NAIA level is probably one of the more difficult student jobs you're going to have. But I think they come out here knowing that they're going to get a degree that's really worth something, and they're going to be able to compete at a high level. So that's been fun. We hope to increase our output out of state a little bit, and that's not to say we don't want in-state students. We're very strong with our in-state students, and we're reconnecting to some of the local cities around Dickinson. But we also want to become a little bit more national.
What about international students?
We are right now at about 8% international students, which is extremely healthy. At the very top, they're about 17%. And I always hate to play Monday morning quarterback because it's easy, right? You already know what happened. We were not ready for 17% international students. We did not have the infrastructure either physically or to support the students coming in. It's a huge change. When you talk to our own students who've gone study abroad, especially to a country that's very different from the U.S., they have a lot of trouble and they have to have a lot of support. And most of the time they do extremely well, but there's that transition. And I think we were bringing in so many students. We did not have that structure to help with the transition. At 8% of international population right now, we are set very well to bring students in, go through that transition, go through the orientation process, and connect them not just to the campus, but to the surrounding community. And to me, that's very important. Most institutions who have a healthy international program are somewhere between 8 and 14%. I'd like to see us grow to maybe 11. I think we could do that quite well.
Okay. So is there still work to be done in order to get Dickinson State's reputation back, or is it now just taking actions moving forward?
Negatives always pop up quicker than positives, and so yes, we still have quite a bit of work to do. We're very strong. If you look at our faculty background and our CVs and our publications, we do amazing work for the institution where we are. We have internationally known faculty members. We have a 10-to-1 student-faculty ratio right now. People pay over $60,000 a year to get that same ratio. We can offer students an education right now that very few public institutions can offer. You're not going to be lost. If you come in as a student, I'm going to know right away if you're in my class or not. Not only that, but if in one quick phone call, I know exactly where you are physically. I can come find you. So I tell students it's great. They can knock on a door and their professor will be there immediately. But it's also not great because there's really nowhere to hide. So you're going to get a wonderful education, but you're also going to be forced into a leadership role. Right now the campus is fairly small. We have many different clubs, societies, athletics. At some point in your first year, you're going to be placed in a leadership role. And you're going to have to learn how to deal with those. And we're there to help you do that positively. But I always also tell people, when you have the support that we're able to give at DSU now, you're set up to stretch as much as you want. And we want you to stretch far enough where you may fail. And that's okay. Because if you fail, we get to pick you up, dust you off. You're stronger for it. We put you back in the right position. And our goal is to get you to walk across that stage.
Okay. Let's talk about the foundation. You mentioned it a little bit. So is the foundation technically a part of the university or not?
They are separate entities. Mm-hmm. And the old foundation was placed into receivership before I arrived. There were capital projects, buildings. There was also endowment. About $9 million of endowment was within that old foundation. Most of that going to student scholarships. And if you look at the rate of return, you can't spend endowments, you spend the rate of return. That's about $450,000 to $500,000 per year we lost on student scholarships. And we needed to have that replaced prior to the fall of 2016 class coming in. Jim Osmond was irreplaceable in putting together a new foundation. And we hired Ty Orton as director of that foundation. He started on the same day as did I. And he's right down the hallway. I think some days he wishes he were a little further apart. They've recently, since January 1, raised about $1.3 million all towards student scholarships. So we have now covered the next 3 years, and we're starting to rebuild all the endowments that were lost. And you can't. Small schools like DSU, we do get funding from the legislature, but they also expect that we're going to reach out and be self-sufficient to an extent, and that's where the foundation comes in. So they aren't part of the school legally, but they're part of the school morally, ethically, and as we go forward.
Okay.
So.
With that said, what are your sort of immediate goals and then long-range goals?
We have. That's not as easy a question, sure. and so let me back up a little bit. Before we started looking at our goals, we wanted to look at the principles that would drive our decisions. And if you don't mind, I'll go through the 3 principles and then go through, we have 3 major goal areas. Sure. So the 3 principles, I look at them as the corners to a triangle. You don't have the triangle without all 3. They're equally important. So even though I give them in order, they're equally important. But the first one is, we always say communication is a platform upon which we must build. That communication is internal as well as external. I've got 6 monthly touch points within the campus to try to get communication to the campus. And that's taken a little while to build that, knowing what faculty want for information coming out, knowing what staff would like, but also giving them a communication pathway where their voice is heard. We've been working very hard on that. But the city of Dickinson and these small cities and universities, if they're going forward alone, they're not going forward well. So if they aren't going forward together, if they are going forward together, it's a much stronger pathway. And so we've been trying very hard to make sure our outreach to the city is as strong as it can be. I'm on a foundation, I'm on 3 city committees, and I've started an advisory committee from the community just to make sure that DSU is being a good steward for Dickinson and for Southwest North Dakota. So that's part of it, that communication aspect. It has to be always at the forefront of our mind. The second thing is that students are paramount. Doesn't matter how good are your faculty, how good are your facilities. If you don't have students in the seats, you're not doing your job. I say this with 2 caveats. One is that students are not customers. The customer is always right. Students aren't always right, and they know this. Students don't want to get up in front of a group and give a talk. When they do surveys of the 10 greatest fears, number 1 is generally death. Number 2 is generally public speaking. And I say generally because sometimes they flip-flop. So no student is going to get up and spontaneously give a lecture to 100 people in an auditorium. These are things we make them do. We put them in roles where they're going to succeed. We're going to help them succeed, but they don't always get what they want. They don't always want to be up at 2:30 in the morning studying. They don't mind being up at 2:30 in the morning, but not always studying. So these are things we have to do. So that's, and then the second part of that is education is not a commodity. I get very upset when I hear that education is a commodity. Commodities are traded, they're purchased. If somebody walks in, gives me 4 years worth of tuition and walks out, they haven't gotten anything. They're worse off than they were. They're out money. Education is something on which you have to work extremely hard every day. So those are my 2 caveats to students are paramount. And the third is that faculty and staff are core to the institution. To this, most faculty and staff will spend 20, 30, 40 years at one institution. It's more than a job. It's a family. And they're putting in more hours than they'll ever be recompensed. And it really becomes, when they get up in the morning, they're not going to work, they're going to their second family. And we have to take care of them. They always say that your degree at the bachelor level and PhD level is good for about 4 years if we quit learning after obtaining that. So our faculty come in, and we're expecting them to teach our students at the highest possible level. We have to make sure that they can continue learning themselves. So they aren't just teachers, but they're also students their entire lives. And same with our staff. We have to make sure that they're always progressing in their jobs and that they're happy. So those are our 3 principles. And then our 3 goals really are, one is to develop. That's the Theodore Roosevelt Library. We're very happy that's going to be here. It's going to be a separate entity from DSU, but it's going to be connected. And then the Heritage Foundation to rebuild what we have lost with the old foundation. And the second one is strength. And that is to strengthen our student enrollments, both through retention and through increasing the enrollments. And then our third goal is to unify, and that goes back to the communication part and all the different areas.
We're running out of time. If people want more information, where can they go?
Then go to the Dickinson State University. And in quick links, you can go to the president's office. My ugly mug pops straight up, and you can email me directly from there or phone call. Or if you're on campus, please stop by.
All right. Well, thank you for taking your time, and good luck to you.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Stay tuned for more. There's a fascinating exhibit currently on display at the Becker County Museum in Detroit Lakes, Minnesota. The family of an old-time doctor who practiced in and around Detroit Lakes has donated his medical items and equipment, which gives museum goers an idea of what medicine and medical practice was like decades ago.
My father started practice here in 1938, late 1938, until 1965 when he was semi-retired, and then practiced a little bit till 1974. It was in the basement of our house that I presently own, and like at that time there were no clinics. All the doctors or dentists had their offices upstairs and apartments up there. And this is all his equipment here, and we've had it for a number of years. He passed away in 1980. We bought the house for my mother, and then we decided, why are we keeping this? Let's donate it to the Becker County Museum, because then a lot of people will be able to see it and it'll be useful that way.
We received a phone call from the Sprafka family asking if we'd be interested in acquiring all of the items from Dr. Sprafka's medical office. And so we came over and took a look at it. Many of the items were not things we had in our collection, especially things like the exam table, the IV pole. We did have some medical equipment already, but it was smaller items, and so this was really an opportunity to create an exhibit that kind of showcased medicine from the past, if you will, and have a more complete display. I think the two items that probably really stand out for me are the exam table, which is beautiful wood and leather top that you just, of course, do not see in today's world, and the glass IV pole. Again, we're used to going in and having maybe a similar looking pole, but it's all bags and disposable tubing and what have you, not anything that we would have put any sort of medicine in a glass bottle in today's world.
Well, you're not going to see to heat the needles and to give the shots. That's all the thing of the past. Yeah, medicine has changed a whole lot, and yet in many ways there's a lot of similarities too, of what they have, the benches to sit on, to place them up or back in a certain position where the doctor can give you the physical that you need. It was a whole lot different. He did a lot of house calls. Probably, I don't want to say half, but maybe 40% of the babies were born in their house rather than the hospital. It was during the Depression and in the early years of the war, so the people were pretty hard up as far as financially during the Depression. I remember him saying many times some of the farmers might come in and they didn't have money, and he'd take care of them anyway. He says, well, you need medical help. And they would come back maybe a week or 2 weeks later with a bunch of chickens that had been killed and cleaned, or a hind quarter of a steer. He was paid that way many times, which he says is perfectly fine because we have to go to the store and get the food anyway. Sometimes it'd be early in the morning, you might get a call at 5 or 6. His regular office hours were like from 8 until 5, but he'd go to the hospital and deliver babies or take out an appendix for appendicitis and whatever. But yeah, he'd get called late at night. He'd maybe come back at 1 o'clock in the morning. That's just the way it was. I think all of the doctors in town, people had fond memories of them. The local doctors, people had faith in them, and you didn't go out of town in those days. You didn't drive to Fargo. Fargo was a long ways, on the highway. So people went to all the doctors locally, and yeah, people had fond memories of them.
Dr. Long, Dr. Rutledge, quite a bit of equipment from that have been generously donated to the museum from those families. It's been up now a couple months, and when we first put it up, we had quite a few people in, quite a bit of traffic online in the social media world. Lots of people come back to the Detroit Lakes area in the summertime to do research, to visit family, to enjoy the lakes. And so quite a few comments on looking forward to coming back and seeing the exhibit, not only Dr. Sprafka's items, but some of the other medical equipment that we have on display. So we'll intend to leave it up through the summer. So we've had people talk about remembering going to see Dr. Sprafka at his house, or Dr. Sprafka coming to visit, and sometimes those stories go along with maybe some financial struggles and how the families were able to pay for those visits.
We had lots of feedback on Facebook because it was put there. So yeah, and then in town here, I've had a lot of people say, yeah, they've been in and seen it on Facebook, and they're really impressed with the exhibit. It is a great museum for the size of city of Detroit Lakes. I think there was more time. Unfortunately, in the clinics now, you're kind of rushed through because they're on a real tight schedule. You know, they're in and out because they've got another room down the hall that they've got a patient waiting for them, where in those days, the doctor could sit with them and talk for a while and take more time.
Part of our goal at the Becker County Museum is to kind of reinforce all of the history that people are reading. And so if you're reading about something that happened back in that time era and going to the doctor, or what a physician maybe would have carried with them on house calls, an exhibit is there to reinforce that information. And so it kind of makes it a little more real for people.
Well, that's all we have on Prairie Post this week. And as always, thanks for watching.
Funding for Minnesota Legacy programs are provided by a grant from the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4th, 2008. And by the members of Prairie Public.